I'm Clive from Unsung Hero Guitars, and in this video I would like to talk about the issue of counterfeit Epiphone Les Pauls and address some of the questions and comments which regularly arise when one of these pops up on a Facebook group or internet forum, what have you. To give you some background on why I might feel qualified to comment, I'm surrounded by Epiphone Les Pauls, and I've stripped, upgraded and raised the standard of well over 100 of these guitars from all years and factories, doing what I do at Unsung Hero Guitars. So whilst there are obviously some subtle variations, I can categorically state that the counterfeits I've seen are significantly different. One of the first questions to be asked is, do counterfeit Epiphone Les Pauls even exist? Well, yes they do, but the vast majority of the guitar buying public is simply unaware and don't even stop to suspect, which is quite the masterstroke on behalf of the fakers if you stop and think about it. Often when a fake is pointed out, there will be cries of derision and demands to prove it. Which is all fair enough, completely fair enough. But just because someone may not have ever heard of their existence or understand the motive, doesn't mean it's not there. And after all, you don't know what you don't know, right? So now there's a thread running on the Epiphone section of the My Les Paul forum, which is a couple of hundred pages long. It's been running for almost a decade now. There's stacks of evidence in there, but to save you the trawl, I'll outline the differences and with photographs and what have you later on in this video, so that should be a little easier. But if that's not official enough for you, then here's a link to an article which was published by Epiphone back in 2004, highlighting this very issue. And that's about 14 years ago now at the time of doing this video. And in it they highlight particle board, the use of particle board in the counterfeits, and that's medium density fiber board, or MDF commonly known. And so that shows, the presence of that article shows you how long this has been a problem for. And even after all of that time, it's amazing how relatively few guitar buyers even know about this issue. But who would bother fake an Epiphone, lol? That's one of my favourite comments when it pops up. The answer is quite simple. They come out of China, and as we know, there will be fake versions of anything if they think they might make a few quid. They found their way around the world via eBay and continue to circulate via eBay, Gumtree, Craigslist, Facebook selling groups, all kinds of places. And they even get traded at guitar shops and then sold on because they simply don't suspect that such things exist. If you're still unsure of the motivation, just consider how much easier it is to pass off 10 $10 bills as opposed to one $100 bill. People are just much more wary. So by the same principle, it's easier to stuff 10 £300 Epiphones into unsuspecting buyers than it is, one £3,000 Gibson into a much more careful market. But they probably come off the same production line anyway. Now, that's a very common response and a complete misconception that simply isn't true. There is much conjecture that back in the day when Epiphone would subcontract out the manufacture of their guitars, that on occasion some might slip out the side door or roll around on a different shift. Who knows? I don't know. I don't claim to know. But it is completely fair to say that if that was the case, then these guitars would all be the same. The genuine ones would be the same as the counterfeits, and they are not. They are completely different. They are made from different parts, different materials, different components. The volume and tone controls are in different places. The binding on the headstock can be thicker. So that goes to show that they just would not stack up a load of different materials, and they would not retool the production line. It just wouldn't happen. So yeah, if that was the case, if they were coming from the same factory, the same production line, same everything, then they would be the same, and they aren't. It's only the higher end signature models which they bother faking. Again, that's simply not true. Whilst it certainly is the case that one of the more commonly faked models is the Zakk Wylde Bullseye, even the Buzzsaw. The 3 pickup Black Beauty is very common, as are the regular custom line. And it even extends into the standards as well, unfortunately. I've not seen it go as far down maybe as the Studio, but they're certainly more prevalent across the range than even people who are aware of their existence often think. As long as it plays good, who cares? Now, I don't work for Epiphone. I'm not a shareholder. I'm not directly affected by the presence of counterfeits. But just as a musician, just as a guitar lover, I'd like to think that we look after each other, you know. Of course, I don't know how other people set the bar, their standards, their expectations, but anytime I see someone say that a counterfeit plays as well as any Epiphone or better than the Gibson or anything wild like that, then I can't agree, because the fit and finish is well below par. They are substandard instruments. Just don't buy it. They are not equal standard in any respect. Okay, Mr. Know-It-All, so what are the signs? Well, once you've seen enough of these, you can pretty much spot a fake instantly without needing to look too closely, but it's not always the case, so here are the common telltales. Domed tailpiece bolt heads are a common sign. Genuine Epiphones always have flatter tops on these bolts. A scratch plate mounting screw, which is closer to the lower edge as opposed to being more in the middle of the plate that you'd find on a genuine Epiphone. Fake Grover tuners with large washers on the front that have a strange sloping profile and on the back. The center domes are more satin in appearance rather than fully shiny. And the Grover text itself is taller and funky looking when compared to real Grover machine heads. Logo font and position. Now, whilst that can be an indicator, there have actually been so many variations on the genuine ones down the years that it's tough to use that as a determining factor, really. So whilst those 4 are very common signs, there is an outside chance that the first 3, the tailpiece bolt heads, the scratch plate and the tuners, could theoretically have been changed at some point during ownership. Very unlikely that all 3 would have been done. But it could have happened. So therefore, those should not be relied on solely to determine whether or not a guitar is a fake or genuine. However, there are other signs which simply could not have been changed aftermarket, and they're as follows. Control knob location and orientation. Now, the fakes are often all over the place with uneven spacings between them, and if a line was drawn through the pairings, those lines commonly splay out everywhere, whereas genuine ones will run much more parallel with the center line of the guitar itself. Odd-shaped body and lower horn. Not so easy to tell this one. It's more that it leaves you with an uneasy feeling, and indeed, if measured against a genuine Epiphone, it could be more apparent, but you need to be careful of odd photo angles when considering this point. Headstock binding. Now, there's absolutely no way that would have been changed after manufacture. The width of the binding on a fake typically covers about half the thickness of the wood, whereas on a genuine one, it's about 2 or 3 mil, as the photographs show. Of course, there are fake standards too, which don't have headstock binding, so it's well worth bearing that in mind. But any time you see that wide headstock binding, that's a dead cert fake. Serial numbers. Now, this is one of the better known telltales, but it's also the source of a lot of confusion, largely thanks to the GuitarDaterProject website. Now, that website is a bit of fun and indeed a pretty useful tool, in fact, as it can tell you where your guitar was made, in what year, even which month once you put your serial number in. But all that's actually happening is that it uses an algorithm to extract info from the letters and numbers which you type in. It then returns some decoded information, and that's all well and good if the guitar and the serial number are genuine. But as their disclaimer clearly states, it is not any kind of official database and cannot be used to verify the authenticity or otherwise of any guitar. In fact, one of the ways to demonstrate this to people who didn't necessarily understand that's how the Guitar Data Project website worked was to ask them to put in, say, U19081234, and that would have returned a result that would have been from the year 2019, made in the Unsung plant in Korea, which of course was from the future, so they've now invented time travel as well. And I believe you can still now enter one that would correspond to a Chinese guitar that was made in the 90s, and of course they weren't making them in China in the 90s. So there's still some flaws, even though they've kind of headed that off a little bit now. But the bottom line is, just because a serial number checks out on the Guitar Data Project website, that is no guarantee of authenticity. From a purely visual standpoint, another common giveaway when looking at serial numbers is the presence of a large EE at the start of a number. Again, you need to be careful here because there are loads of perfectly genuine Epiphones which start with the EE designation. So that in itself is certainly not proof of a fake. But what is a sign is when the EE is significantly larger and more spaced out, and even a different font to the rest of the digits. It's also important to know that it's not just EE designated serial numbers which appear on the fakes. The format which Epiphone introduced around 2008, featuring numbers only, also gets used. Now check out this modded black custom. Some of you will already be up to speed with some of the other telltales here, but here's its serial number starting with 09. And as if by magic or by sheer fakery, here is exactly the same set of numbers once again, but this time they're on a vintage Sunburst custom. This too is a similar format used on genuine Epiphones, but notice how the font looks much taller? That is exactly the same number on another fake. So all of these things are external signs, but another way is to actually have a look inside the guitar, inside the control cavities and in the toggle switch. And if you see, as in the photograph, layers of MDF, then I'm sorry, that's bad news. What if I discover I have a counterfeit Epiphone Les Paul? Well, first of all, what usually happens when someone learns that they don't have a genuine one is there's a great deal of disappointment. Now that's perfectly understandable, completely natural, but eventually they tend to be quite appreciative for the heads up and take it as well as can be expected. However, on occasion you do come across someone who knows full well what they're selling, and they tend to very quickly get very aggressive and very defensive. And that's because they've been called out for trying to stuff a fake into someone who may not necessarily be quite as aware. So what do you do if you have one of these? Well, it doesn't automatically follow that you need to do anything. Although substandard materials and workmanship would tend to suggest otherwise. If you're happy with the guitar, then rock on. If you do have some comeback at a shop, or there's a paper trail proving that you recently bought the guitar in good faith, you can then go back to the seller armed with the details in this video, or the evidence that will inevitably become more widely available through the Epiphoney Facebook group, etc. Or indeed even point them to the Epiphone article and make your case. Shops in particular do not want to be known for dealing in counterfeit goods and will no doubt do the right thing. And on that note, reporting counterfeit goods to eBay is always worth a go, and I'd encourage anyone to do so with knowledge of the relevant facts. But I tend to suspect that unless Epiphone or Gibson come knocking fully lawyered up with a case against them assisting in the sale of counterfeit goods involving their trademark, then I tend to think they're not too concerned, shall we say. Why should anyone care? So maybe it shouldn't matter to me or anyone that isn't an Epiphone employee or a Gibson stakeholder, but I am a fan, and as a guitar community I think we can do better. In fact, in the early days of Unsung Hero Guitars, I actually bought a counterfeit Epiphone Les Paul unknowingly, and I knew all along that there was something amiss with this guitar. I mean, it looked pretty, but it was so unplayable. There was a big hump where the neck joins the body, and the frets would have had to have been so low, almost past the board itself, to get the thing playable at the top end. So I knew there was something wrong, and then I did a lot of research and discovered the truth. And I got to tell you, it was a pretty crappy feeling. But we live and learn, and I've developed a keen eye ever since for obvious reasons. So hopefully this has been helpful and informative and not too scary or soul destroying. Please come and join our Facebook group, Epiphoney, the facts about fakes, if you're not already there. Also post links to eBay ads or what have you that you think might be a little bit suspect, so we can give those a wide berth. Or even if you've got a guitar yourself that you're not too sure about after seeing the content of this video, by all means post some pictures and there'll be somebody around to calm your nerves or unfortunately spread the bad news. But either way, see you next time.